Milk. Oh, that's milk. Hey everybody, welcome to Suspenders of Belief. I'm Heavy.
And I'm Traby.
And we finally watched Alien, for real this time.
Yeah, we sat down and we watched a movie. It was pretty cool.
Now, the original Alien movie, directed by Ridley Scott, probably needs no introduction, but it is a little old. The movie came out in 1979, and it's kind of a fun take on the horror trope of the slasher movie, which is why it was kind of a fun follow-up to something like Halloween, which was not the first slasher film, but kind of the first that put all the pieces together and assembled them in the kind of standard format that we see. And the nice thing about Alien is it takes that format, but then puts it in space. So it's not just about something or someone going around and killing all these people, but unlike with Halloween, where it was a nice familiar place of, living in your nice, safe, suburban household, that now you're being stalked by a killer, but now you're up in space. There's literally nowhere for you to go. There is no help.
Yeah, it's way more isolated. That feeling of there's nowhere for you to go makes it the whole thing more heightened and more elevated compared to Halloween. Halloween it's hard. I meant to look at the timeline because I don't think Halloween could have influenced Alien at all because it's very close. I meant to look at the time frame. They may have been able to see Halloween in the theaters while still working on Alien, but it would have been so far along in its production that I don't think that it would have affected it in any way. But because of Halloween, we had a million slasher movie knockoffs in the early 80s that were all aping off of that, and most of them didn't quite nail what made it work. And the reason why I conflate Halloween and Alien very similarly in my head is because they came out about the same time. They have that slasher movie structure for the most part, but they both rely very heavily on atmosphere to be effective, and that's definitely the case with Alien. But I would elevate Alien above Halloween in its execution and its tone. There's so many layers of tension that build in Alien that start off in kind of a mundane thing. It's like, well, we've got to land on this crazy planet. It's kind of unsettling. Oh no, this guy's got a thing on his face. That's really weird. I hope we don't all die from a weird space plague. Oh no, the little thing escaped and now it's running around the ship. Oh man, we got to catch it. Oh no, now it's even bigger. So it just really escalates in a very satisfying way. Well, Halloween doesn't really do that. It does its own thing.
We talked about that in other movies as well, where sometimes it feels like the plot is kind of changing as it goes along, almost as if it's making itself up, like it doesn't quite know what to do. And I do feel like Alien is intentionally misdirecting you on that sort of thinking. Like if you went into this movie cold without knowing what the xenomorph is or how the xenomorph's genealogy works or how its evolution cycle is or any of that, if you just threw that out the window and we're watching the movie cold, it's about an hour in and we're still on the planet. It really does take its time. It's a very slow burn.
You don't feel the length, I don't think. At no point am I like tapping my toe going like, all right, checking my watch. Is it enough already? Let's move on. There were moments even in the original Halloween, and I'm a big fan of Halloween, where I'm like, okay, enough already. Let's get on with it. Let's get to that third act. So
yeah, trying to think of this movie as a 3-act structure is actually kind of tough because we don't even know that the alien itself is going to be a threat. Again, removing yourself from the experience and just watching the film as it is, because the story kind of slowly unfolds before you get to oh no, there's a giant monster on the ship that's hunting us down. What do we do about it?
Yeah, it's structured and paced impeccably. One of the other things I really liked about the movie too is the set design. It all feels very real. It feels like they really found some spaceship somewhere and shot on it, even though it's complete fabrication. It's all very, I want to say almost comfortable in a way, because it just feels like a very mundane kind of, these are working class people doing a job. The dialogue feels very naturalistic, like some of the first scene with dialogue in it, they're talking about, when are we going to get our bonus?
Before we dock, I think we ought to discuss the bonus situation.
Right.
Brett and I, we think we deserve full shares, right, baby?
It all feels very grounded, even though it's on a damn spaceship. It's really well done.
It's one thing about the spaceship in and of itself that's kind of unique, is a lot of times when you look at spaceships, they're designed to be so sleek and so aerodynamic, but in space, none of that really matters. And one thing that's kind of neat about the creativity of this ship's design is it looks more like a floating city. Just a construction of things that have been built on top of each other. And that's a little bit more organic than what you think of what a spaceship that takes place 100% up in space would look like. It doesn't need to be aerodynamic. It doesn't need to be streamlined. It doesn't need to be smooth. And even inside the ship, you get a lot of that. Some hallways are much more industrial, where you'll see like the raw pipes going along the side, and sometimes they are more smooth and they have like compartmentalized panels. So it really feels like different areas of the ship are newer, different areas of the ship are older, some are, a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, some of them have cheaper lighting. And again, it kind of is that art from adversity, where I feel like they were probably just doing the best they could But because it is a little mismatched, and there are some kind of things throughout the ship that do blend a little bit better, and some things that don't, where you walk from one room to another, and the aesthetics are completely different, little touches like that really make the movie feel like a more cohesive experience.
It's a lot of attention to detail. You can tell a lot of it is deliberate. The interior of the ship, much like the exterior, looks like it has had multiple different things slapped onto it over the years. Like it started with one design, then they added on and they added on and they added on, or they rebuilt or they remodeled or whatever. Because like you said, there's so much variation even within the corridors. There are parts that do kind of look new, like shiny and new, but it doesn't, that still feels deliberate. It still feels like, no, this was just something new that they added into the ship recently. While this other part of the ship that's all run down, like the bit where Brett gets it, where it was like, what is the point of this room? It's like it's the place where you get murdered by the alien, but it's like got chains hanging down and there's moisture and this old equipment lying around. It's like, well, maybe this was something important, but it's just not used anymore, so it's just kind of fallen into disrepair. But it all feels deliberate. At no point does it feel like the background is like garbage bags hanging up to try to make it look like some kind of weird alien tunnel or something, and it's really sad. You can see where the budget went in terms of that, because it didn't really have to spend that much on effects other than the practical effects of the alien costume. Most of it is that set of the spaceship.
I do feel like we should talk about the alien costume itself, though, because the creativity of what a xenomorph looks like. Thinking about like aliens before this point, a lot of times they were just like, big head or green or just very humanoid looking. And to be fair, the xenomorph is just a guy in a costume, sure, but they go so far out of their way to like exaggerate joints and limbs, and he has extra fingers, and his head is elongated and strange. He has like multiple protruding mouths. He's got these like rods on his back and this like crazy spiky tail. Like he really feels like an amalgamation of a bunch of different creatures, and I feel like that's kind of a fun take on this is an extraterrestrial being that, as the sequels would delve into, yes, it's kind of taken on a humanoid shape, but that's deliberate because of its physiology, etc., etc. But I still think that the design of this alien, you can't underestimate how cool and how much work went into. I can imagine just walking around in that suit must have been an absolute nightmare because it's got so many parts.
Yeah, it would have been difficult to like manage not knocking something off because you're not used to taking up like 6 foot more cubic feet around you all the way around.
Right.
It's kind of insectoid in a way, something that's not always very apparent in the movie, but you can tell in some of the old action figures, was that it was meant to kind of have a humanoid skull at its face, but that's also supposed to tie into the fact that it did gestate from a human, so it does have some humanoid features, but for the most part it's just really unsettling. I like the fact that it's hard to wrap your brain around it, because most of it is kind of shot peripherally. It's in the shadows. You see a head, you see an arm, you see parts of it. You rarely see it in full frame, like head to toe.
And that's definitely one thing that's good about a horror movie is you don't want to show your monster too much, and some of the worst shots of the creature are when you do get the full body shots of like, oh yeah, that's just a guy in a costume. So it's definitely more intimidating and more scary when your brain has to kind of imagine, like, how big is this creature? How many limbs does it have? Whenever you're making those leaps in your head, it makes it a little bit scarier.
It's way more unsettling because you don't see anything. You can't comprehend exactly what's happening.
There's a lot of characters, and you could probably lump a lot of them into kind of just general. A lot of them don't have a lot of characterization going on. But I think one of the things that was the main takeaway from the movie coming out in 1979 was that your lead character, your final girl, so to speak, in horror terms, is not just a girl who's in over her head or desperately trying to fight against some kind of creature or monster, but she's actually the most intelligent, clearly throughout the film, making the most headstrong, the right calls, and then, the things are only escalating or getting worse because they're not listening to her. And that's satisfying. She wasn't the idiot. She wasn't just the one who survived by luck.
Yeah, and it's something that's kind of absent. Again, we just watched Halloween before this. Like, Jamie Lee Curtis survives just from, I guess, persistence, really. There's multiple times at the climax of that movie where she drops the knife and she thinks Michael's dead. And it's like, no, stop. He's clearly not dead. Like, don't give up yet. There's no moment like this in Alien. It's pretty tight. Every time Ripley has any kind of action, you understand exactly where she's coming from. You understand why she would react the way that she did. The only thing that is questionable is at the end when the alien's in the shuttle, you're like, well, why the hell is the alien in the shuttle? But Ripley's response to the situation always seems logical. It seems reasonable. You're never yelling at Ripley to get out of there, go out the door rather than up the stairs. There's never a moment like that. She never trips and falls,
right?
For no reason.
The conclusion of this film is definitely that one little piece that sticks out in my brain is just why does it, what? Because I feel like the ending is much tighter with she gets aboard the escape pod, the ship blows up, She does her little epilogue roll credits. Nice, neat little bow. But instead, for some reason, the alien has stowed away on the escape pod. How it would know to go there, I have no idea. I speculated that maybe the alarm was louder in the main part of the ship and it's just quieter here, so it was just getting away from the noise. But that was me grasping at straws, trying to make some kind of sense. Because even once you see the alien, it's just kind of cuddled up there, like taking a nap. And when it sees Ripley or she gets too close to him, he's just kind of like, he kind of like swats at her, but doesn't get up. He just kind of stays nestling in his little like sleepy pod, like, leave me alone, I'm sleeping. And then when it finally does come to confront her, it's because she's pushed a little button to like spray it with aerosol to piss it off. And so when it's coming to confront her about it, that's when she blows the airlock to blow him out. And after the scene was over, I just was wondering, was this added in post? Because it doesn't feel necessary whatsoever. I think that the movie could have just ended with, the ship blows up, she's drifting off in space, and that's the end. But it does feel kind of tacked on.
I feel like it was to give like an emotionally satisfying ending for Ripley. Because yes, she was the smartest one all along and she's making all the right decisions. But if she had just gotten on the shuttle and ran away, her survival would not have felt like she wouldn't have had any agency about it. It would have just something that happened. Well, at the end, when she is the one who gets the alien out of that corner, she sprays him with aerosol, wakes him up, gets him out of bed, and then jettisons him out into space. She's the one that has to do that. She's the one that takes action. So I think that was included to make it more satisfying. And like you said, I don't know at what point that was included. That may have always been there since day one, but it does feel almost like an epilogue. Like, well, what if more happened? We've got the movie all tied up in a nice bow, but what if a little bit more happened?
So, what would you rate this movie?
I think I would want to rate it a 9 or a 10. Our 10 was reserved for movies that kind of fundamentally change the way you think that the medium of film can operate. So maybe not. Like, this was a very well executed movie. So probably a 9, I guess, realistically.
And I do think that a 9 is exactly where I would have placed it, because again, it's going to come down to a matter of personal opinion, whether a movie is a 9 or a 10, because it's basically a perfect or a nearly perfect movie. But that the difference of the 9 and the 10 is it does fundamentally change the way you look at something, whether it's the topic, whether it's the influence on film as a genre, whether it's the way that, how you looked at aliens. I think a good example of a 10 for a sci-fi movie just off the top of my head would be The Day the Earth Stood Still, because it took that concept of aliens coming to Earth and it spun it on its head, where it's rather than just they're coming for conquest, they're coming for curiosity. Like, no, they deliberately came and they sought us out for a specific reason, and it was not, we need your resources, we want to take over your planet, we want to murder you all. It was an actually more intelligent reason. So I think that's the difference, is Alien did do a very, very great job of its premise, of the slasher in space, no one can hear you scream, you can't get away, how do you deal with this terrifying situation? It does a great job at that, but I don't think it necessarily challenges you or makes you think about exploring space in a unique way, and I don't think it has the impact of, like, after Alien, every space movie always made sure to do blank. Like, it doesn't have that kind of lasting impact. It's a great movie, and I do think that it leads into probably one of the best sequels of all time, but I don't think it's quite a 10. All right then, so what are we watching next?
Well, since we're on the slasher train, I thought maybe we would go to the next chronologically significant movie. Not all 8 of them necessarily, but the first, Friday the 13th.
All right then, guys, next time's on Suspenders of Belief, Friday the 13th.
Killer Mommy.
What?